I decided once high school football was over, obviously sports for me go to the winter sports, which are like basketballs and so forth. But I decided JT Cruz was such a good interview. We need to keep this going. And I don't know what we're going to talk about for the next few weeks, but I mean, hey, we'll get something. So,
here's what I can tell you, Bob. Like,
sure.
High school football ended for you. Like, it never ends for me. That's the reality of being a head coach and a program where you're trying to continue to build and continue to grow and continue to be successful. So like right now we're in the period where, it's we wish we were still playing. We're kind of, a little pissed off that we're not still playing. But then you got to deal with things like, getting your helmet sent off for reconditioning, inventory and all your equipment, seeing what you need to order for next year, all that stuff. And then once you get back from Christmas break and you're in January, man, it's like, it's go time. Like now we're lifting. We're 3 days a week in the weight room. We're getting after it. We're seeing, who's who and what's what guys are we going to lead on next year? Who are we going to start to develop as leaders? All that stuff. So like, yeah, we're not playing anymore, but like high school football it's still rolling, man. It never stops.
When you were at, how long has it been since the VHSL's done the whole, like, you can go 12 months a year rule?
So as long as I've been coaching high school football. Okay. Now, when I was playing, it was different. And I don't remember the exact rules, but I know it was like, because we lifted when I was playing, we lifted.
Sure.
But I think there were rules around like you couldn't use a ball outside or anything like that. And I think it got to the point where like it was, just like anything else with the VHSL, it's all self-reporting, right? And so like the people who kind of skirted the rules a little bit and weren't doing things the right way, well, they had an advantage because they were getting extra practice time. And so I think rather than trying to figure out a way to enforce it, the VHSL just said like, you know what, like have at it, like do whatever you want. And there's plus sides and downsides to that. Like, it's a plus in that you can get out there and develop skills with your kids that maybe you wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to do, particularly in things like the passing game where you're not like, banging against each other all the time. There's downsides because I think it gives kids to a certain false degree, like they feel like they have to choose when they really don't. Like, and we encourage our guys, like, man, go play other sports, go play basketball, go wrestle, go play baseball, go run track, all that stuff. But then they almost feel like, well, if I'm doing that, then I don't want to miss out on football. And like, that's kind of the negative aspect of it. And you see so much sports specialization with kids now. Even, it was kind of there when I was coming up and playing, but it seems like it's such a greater degree now. And I think that's partly due to VHSL just kind of saying like, you have these dead periods throughout the year, but other than that, you pretty much do whatever you want.
So you're a football coach and you say go play other sports, but you just kind of hit on it. Your kids are like, well, if I'm playing another sport, I'm missing the weight room. How much do coaches really want their kids to play other sports, and do you encourage it maybe more heavily than you would do? I don't know if that makes sense, but like, you want to get your kids to play in other sports because I think they can learn different roles. Weight room is going to get them stronger. How much do you really want your kids to play other sports?
I mean, the truth is like, and you look at every team, like the best athletes, the best players, those are the guys who are doing different things throughout the year. And probably the best example that I can use from our team this past year is Fax Rowland. So this was his first year as a varsity player. He started as a freshman and a sophomore on JV and got a ton of reps there. And so coming up, we were, we had a pretty good idea of what he was going to be, but, we didn't know that he was going to have the season that he had. And he had a phenomenal season, both offensively and defensively for us as a linebacker on defense and then as a wing slot on offense, carrying the ball, block, and doing all that stuff. And so he's good at a lot of different things. He's good carrying the ball. He's good in the receiving game. He's good blocking. He doesn't miss many open field tackles on defense. He's good getting off blocks. And like, if you look at the kid, he's not necessarily bigger, faster, or stronger than anybody else. He has a knack for knowing how to move his body and understanding like how people are trying to attack him and how to utilize space to his advantage. And like, I think all of that comes from the fact that not only does the kid play football, but he also plays basketball and he also plays lacrosse. And so like, I think all of that together helps him be the athlete that he is on the football field. And then I think playing football probably helps him be a better athlete in basketball. And I think playing football and basketball helps him be a better athlete in lacrosse. So it's not like you're losing anything by playing those other sports. Like it's making him better at each one. And one of the things that's great at JF, it's actually something that we finally were able to make happen this year, is we have a strength class, 2 of them, as a matter of fact, that are just dedicated for football, where, there's some other kids in there, but it is the vast majority of football players. And we're missing a couple kids here and there just due to scheduling conflicts and things like that. But for the most part, we have one period that is probably 90% varsity football players and another period that's about 90% JV football players. And so even those kids that are playing other sports, we have an opportunity to still kind of stay on top of them in the weight room and making sure that they get the work that they need to get done in there. And so, like, to me, it's almost like they get the best of all worlds if they're doing it that way.
How much will you pay attention to what goes on in the VHSL now for the next few weeks?
Oh, you talking about from a playoff standpoint, like other
Correct.
teams and things like that? I mean,
Sure.
yeah, I'll stay on top of it. And truthfully, like at this point, I'm rooting for Sherando, right? Like you want to see your region go out there and represent itself well, and typically that's Salem. Just by the nature of who Salem is, they're usually playing this deep into the playoffs. This year it's Sherando, and so like, yeah, I'm rooting for them. And now, did I watch that game, Sherando versus Salem last week? Yeah, absolutely. Kind of, and I get back to that, kind of ticked off a little bit. It's like, man, we turned the ball over 5 times against Sherando. I felt like we were in that game and had plenty of opportunities to win it. It wasn't like we were just totally outmatched. And then you see them go out there and beat a Salem team. You're like, you kind of go the what ifs, right? And so it's encouraging in certain senses. It's like, you're not far off in the program, but it's also frustrating. It's like, man, we were there. Like we had our opportunities. But I think, just the nature of football, everybody's saying that right now, except for the teams that are still playing. So
You gonna go to LU for state titles?
Probably not. I may watch them on NFHS. Honestly, I'm not a big go and watch them live, just because I know now that we have the ability to stream pretty much any high school football game. Like that's usually what I'm do. If you go to LU and it's a whole day, right? And just where I'm at in my life right now, like that is hard to come by. 7-month-old and soon to be 4-year-old at home, and especially just coming off a football season where my wife takes on a big part of that load. She's like, nah, you don't get those days anymore. Like you're gonna be here. And so maybe I'll have it on in the background while I'm doing who knows what with the kids.
Let's pretend you could go though. Would you?
What's that?
If you could go, would you?
Yeah, I mean, if I didn't have anything else going on, sure, I'd go out there and watch some high school football for sure.
Okay.
I enjoy that. Honestly, I enjoy watching high school football these days more than college or pros.
Right. Well, I mean, it's good to know that you're not having PTSD or anything about watching it when you're not. And I mean that respectfully.
No,
you're not there, but you can still deal with it.
I hear you, and I mean that's part of it, right? Going into a football season, what I've only really. And I got to think about this as a player and as a coach. The number of seasons that I was a part of where we won our last game, and so I think there was maybe 1 year at CNU where we did not make the playoffs. That would have been my sophomore year, and then my first year at JF. So I don't know if we won our last game my sophomore year at CNU or not. I know for a fact that we won our last game my first year at JF, and that's because it was the only game we won all year. And so, I'd rather be in this situation where we lost our last game, making the playoffs. But that's kind of the deal, right? Unless you win it all, you're probably not going to win the last game of the season. And that's just the nature of the beast, man.
What went wrong against Sherando?
It's easy to sit there and say turnovers, and certainly I think turnovers played a big part in it. I don't know how many times we turned the ball over all season, probably maybe in the 5-ish range. And then to go out there and turn the ball over 5 times, it's going to be tough to win a game like that. Especially fumbles, right? We had not had issues with ball security pretty much all year. And then to lose 3 fumbles. And there was a portion during that game, so we scored, somewhat before half to go up 7-6. And then we came out after half, we got a pick, we scored again, and now all of a sudden it's 14-6. Got to stop. And I think, we were moving the ball. And I think had we scored there, momentum's on our side, and now we're rolling. Well, instead of that, we fumbled, and they got the ball, and then they scored. And we stopped them on 2 points. We got some momentum back, and we kept it. We kept the lead. It was 14-12. Kickoff return, got a big return, got the ball in their territory, and then we fumbled again. And at that point, we lost the momentum, and it was hard to get it back. And that's taking nothing against Sherando because they played really, really well. They did some things against us that a lot of teams hadn't done throughout the year, and that they really played our rocket sweep really, really well. it was hard for us to line up and run power against them just because they were so disciplined in what they were doing. So it was a lot of little things. The field conditions were tough on our guys. It was, one of the few games that we actually played on a natural surface, and it didn't rain pretty much the whole week, and so it was slick. It was wet out there. And not to say that didn't affect both teams. I think just the nature of Sherando having played on a surface like that all year, they were a little bit more adept to it than we were, and our guys were slipping around a little bit.
Well, let me interrupt real quick. It was cold and windy too, right?
Yeah. And so, that going into that, especially I think it got better as the game went on, but you're sitting there pregame, it's like, man, I don't know if we're going to be able to throw the ball at all. It was cold and windy, I think is almost worse for throwing the ball than rain. Obviously, like a torrential downpour, you're not going to be able to throw the ball in that. But if it's just kind of a steady drizzle, I think you can still throw the ball. But when it's windy, like really windy, that's when it's tough. And then you throw cold on top of that, it's tough. And then it got better. It got a little bit warmer, honestly, as the game went on. But yeah, it was a lot of little things that just didn't go our way.
In our interviews coming up, we might have some culture topics, coaching topics, throwback topics, things like that. We're not going to go off the record or anything. But speaking of that culture topic, in terms of, because you hear a lot nowadays where some coaches will kind of, quote unquote, throw their teams under the bus. What does throw your team under the bus mean in terms of, I know Hugh Freeze got accused of it a little bit this year at Ole Miss or at Auburn, for instance, by throwing his team under the bus when he said the players need to play better. As a coach, what's the line where you can not throw your team under the bus? Like if you said XYZ, what's throwing your team under the bus? Does that make sense?
So it's tough for me to say because honestly, I don't think I've ever played for or coached with a coach who's ever done that. Mm-hmm. And God's honest truth, the first thing that I said to my team when we were in the locker room was after that Sherando game, if this is anybody's fault, if there's anybody to blame, it's me. I didn't do you guys enough to prepare you to go out here and win this football game. And truthfully, whether it was playing for Coach Woody at Brookville or Matt Kelchner, who I played for and then coached for at CNU, they both had a similar attitude in that when you win, it's all because of the players.
Sure.
Man, they went out there and they played so well and they executed so well and they did a great job. And then when you lose, it's my fault as a coach. I didn't do a good enough job to prepare them. Right. And I think that's the attitude you got to have. And so I think when you talk about throwing your team under the bus, it would be the inverse of that, right? To go in there and say, well, the game plan that we had was great. Man, we had them beat on the whiteboard. Our kids just didn't go out there and execute.
Right. Right.
That's, to me, that would be throwing your team under the bus.
How can you have your team prepared better for conditions that are not ideal?
Honestly, I think, it's something that I've talked about with my staff. Hey, if we find ourselves in that situation again,
mm-hmm.
what do we need to do? And we've talked about, maybe it's, hey, we need to go out and practice on a natural surface at one point throughout the week, knowing that, there's a potential chance for, and truthfully, it wasn't even it was the surface combined with the fact that it was it had just rained so much the week leading up to it where the field was, it was carrying a lot of water and it was pretty muddy. And so maybe finding a way to simulate that, go out and practice with our guys on a slick surface so they understand, this is kind of what it feels like to not have your footing 100%. Maybe you need to adjust your stance, adjust your get off a little bit, things like that. So there's some things we can do there. Wet ball drills is always one of those, things that you can do to emphasize ball security in bad conditions. And maybe that was something, we did a little bit throughout the year, but maybe not leading into that game to the same degree that we should have. So, little things like that. And the crazy thing about football is I can sit here and pull my hair out over all those
sure.
little things. And if just one thing in that game goes differently, we're having a completely different conversation. And we're not talking about that at all.
Where do you guys
that's the crazy thing about football. We practice on our game field. We're on the turf.
Yeah. I was going to say, cause I know back in the old days, cause I went to JF, they practiced they called it the practice field, which was kind of more where the softball field is.
Yeah.
If you've ever been to JF, that's more of a grassy surface. Field turf has come into play in probably the last 20 years or so. So most teams are going to practice on a field turf surface when they can because they can go out in any conditions.
Right. And that's, that's the advantage of having turf. And
right.
Yep. Jeff over at Brookville, they have a natural surface. And so that's conversations we've had. And I've told him, dude, you got to find Jeff Cruz.
You one and only that guy?
I know him tangentially. I told dude, you got to find a way to turf your field because,
right.
And it's harder at JF. It's good that we have turf because, especially in the spring, man, you got men's and women's soccer, and we have lacrosse. So you got men's and women's lacrosse out there too, and like that thing is just getting chewed up.
Well, and I was going to say turf doesn't only help one. It doesn't only help one part of. It doesn't only help one team per se. It helps
the whole school, the whole program, right? Like you can go out there, and especially on a natural surface, like it's not even just the day of the weather. Like you got to take into things like, okay, if it rained on Monday and maybe it's sunny on Tuesday, but can I get out there on Tuesday and practice on that field, or am I going to chew it up? And then once you chew it up, like you almost never get it back. That's right. You got to be really careful about that. You go out there one day and chew your practice field up, you're gonna have a mud pit all year. Right. And because again, we dealt with that at CNU. We had a natural surface on our playing field, and then we had 2 full-size practice fields that were also natural surface. And so, like, those some of the equations, some of the things you have to think about. Where it's turf, it's like, dude, we're just gonna go. Like, it could be pouring down rain, and we're gonna go out there and practice.
I said we weren't going off the record, but I didn't say we wouldn't go behind the scenes a little bit. When you go behind the scenes, who cleans the turf?
So I think once a year we have somebody come through with like the actual machine that gets out there and scrapes it and gets everything off. We try and do something, again, once a year, and we do it. We call it our fall cleanup day prior to the season, and it's not just for the turf, but it's like for the whole stadium complex. We'll get the team and the community, and everybody goes out there and picking up trash and you know, painting stuff and just doing general renovations as we see it. And then throughout the year, we really stay on top of our guys. Like, there is no trash on that field. Like, you'll see, you know, kids that got tape and they'll take their tape off and throw it. Like, dude, if I find tape on the field, like, do not let me find tape on the field. You know,
but can you squeegee the turf or anything like, I mean, is it a squeegee or a vacuum type thing, anything that you guys can do realistically?
Honestly, I don't think there's anything like that. Maybe there is. I don't know. That's a Jeremy Fink question. That's not a JP Cruz question.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, man.
Like that. You would think turf is easier to clean from that. I mean, I get you're saying the once a year type thing, but you know, if it rains on Monday and you go out on Tuesday, I mean, I get the turf. It's kind of like, you know, and you correct me if I'm speaking out of context here. It's kind of like a sponge to where the water's going to absorb to where in grass it might still sit there. But at the end of the day, I would think if you're kind of, you know, I don't want to say wet mopping it or anything like that, but I would think you can get the water pushed off the main surface because, I mean, the water's still going to sort of be there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and it will be, it'll be a little bit slick. I think the advantage of turf is because of those black pellets. Like, once the sun comes out, it dries immediately. It's not like a natural surface where it's got that mud and it's going to hold that moisture for a little bit. Like, once that sun hits it, it's going to absorb all of that heat and it's going to immediately dry. Now, again, that's the disadvantage of turf, right? Is it's going to absorb all that heat. And so during the fall, now that wet bulb comes into play and, like, you know, where you're talking about temperature restrictions, and it can be almost 10 degrees hotter on the turf than it can be on natural grass just because, again, it is absorbing and holding all that heat. And so that's kind of the other side of it, that truthfully football is probably the only sport that has to deal with it. But there are days in August camp where, you know, it's a hot day. It's 90. It's not like, you know, dangerously hot, but then all of a sudden you get on the turf and it is dangerously hot. Now, the advantage of JS is we're kind of down in the bowl, and so the tree line will hit the trees, and you'll start getting some shade on the field, which will really start to cool it down. But, yeah, I mean, I guess it's pluses and minuses to everything, right? Yeah, turf has its own advantages, has its own disadvantages.
I was trying to think where I was going to go next, but I can't remember. I know what I was going to say. Turner Ashby played LCA last week, and when I talked to Scott Turner, Turner Ashby's head coach, a week ago, he talked about, and kind of you touched on it earlier, about having a strength coach. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You are technically the strength teacher at the school.
Yeah, so I am one of them. So myself and one of my assistant coaches, David Harlow, we both kind of tag team the weight room. We actually have a strength class and a personal fitness class. And so there are times where we'll both be, teaching at the same time. And basically what we do is we'll just combine those two classes, and we have a personal fitness room in addition to our weight room, and kind of leave it up to the kids as to where they want to go and what they want to take part in that specific day. As far as like programming of who is designing the workouts and who is leading the workouts for our off-season conditioning program, that is Coach Harlow. And like he does a phenomenal job. And I'm going to shout out another guy, Nick McGuire. So Nick McGuire, this will be our third year with him. Nick, from a strength and conditioning standpoint, from a speed development standpoint, like that dude is on a different level than anywhere I've ever been, anybody I've ever been around. I mean, just his understanding of the different biomechanical things that you can do to improve your speed, like it has done wonders for our program. And God's honest truth, like, you know, we made a big jump. I guess it's 2 years ago now in 2023 when we had the 10-win season. And like that was coming off of the first off season that Nick had worked with our team. And I genuinely believe that made a huge, huge difference in the success that we had. Just the things that he does with our kids in terms of development for them, like it is second to none, man.
Yeah, we hate giving other people praise on this podcast, like David Harlow, like Nick McGuire, like anybody like that. But how much of what Harlow and McGuire or even JT does in the weight room has to be just as much motivation as it does technique?
Yeah, so that's and so I mentioned we have the strength class. And so kind of the tricky thing, once you have that strength class, well, now we got all our kids together, right? And so the question is, do you lift them during the day, or do you try and find other things for them to do in that class, maybe some flexibility, things like that, to where now you can lift them again after school? And so me as a coach, like, I think it is important to get our entire team together. And again, it's not our entire team because we have other kids doing other sports and things like that. But anybody who's not involved actively in another school sport, the expectation is that they are going to come to our off-season workouts, because I think it is as important for a talent, a strength, a speed development standpoint as it is for a team chemistry standpoint. Like, that is almost where you build your team and you build your culture is in the weight room. Like, that stuff happens there. The work ethic that you develop, you know, the grind, the embrace of hard work that, you know, you have to have on the practice field in the fall, like that stuff, you build that in the weight room through the conditioning in there. And so, like, I mean, we will push our kids and push them hard in the weight room so that they understand, like, man, you got to learn how to push through that. You got to learn how to not just survive when it's hard, but to still give full effort. And so again, like I cannot speak highly enough of the job that Coach Harlow does of leading those dudes in there. And then what Coach McGuire does from a speed and agility standpoint of, like, again, teaching them technique, but also the cultural side of it, of building that culture of hard work and perseverance and grind and all that stuff, man.
How many kids do you think you probably teach during the week?
How many, like just general students?
Yeah. I'm not talking football extracurricular. I'm talking during the school day. How many students?
I got some big classes.
Okay.
I have 5 classes that all average probably in the low 30s.
Okay. So let's go 150.
Yeah,
let's go
sure.
150 just to be safe. How many students, again, I'm not asking for specifics, but how many students roughly are from other sports? 20?
Yeah, more than that. I would say probably 50-ish.
Okay.
There's more of just general student population in there than honestly maybe there should be. Just because, well, and it's one of those deals where, like, you know, those kids are there because they feel like it's a quote unquote easy A, and honestly
sure.
it is. Like, as long as you go in there and you exercise, like, you're gonna get an A. And sometimes that can almost interfere with other kids who, like, they genuinely want to go in there and work and get after it. You know, again, we were able to put the football class together, and part of that is because we have such large numbers in football that you can almost fill out an entire class section. And even more than that, like, they're excited. Like, we can put 45 kids in one class, and that'll open up more spots. Like, heck yeah, we'll do that. You know, guys is fired up about being able to do that. Whereas, like, if you were to try and do something like that for maybe like softball or baseball or soccer and have specific classes, you're not dealing with the same number of kids, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult there. But like we have, you know, things and programs for those kids, and kind of my philosophy is, like, if you have something from your coach that they want you to do in this class, like, absolutely, like, bring that to me and come in here and do that. Like, this is your opportunity to do that. And some programs, like, they take advantage of that and they'll give their kids workouts to do in that strength class. And other ones are like, nope, we trust what you guys are doing there. Like, keep them going. And that's cool too.
And you know, you touched on the point that I was trying to get to with that. How much do you need to be on the same page as Coach Newton, the girls soccer coach, or Coach Zaring, the boys soccer coach, or G, the baseball coach, or whatever, to kind of ensure that, hey, we're going to get your kids ready just as much as any other kid's going to get ready?
Yeah, and like I said, it's one of those things where, like, you know, I'm never going to go to them and be like, you have to give me a workout to get to these kids. Like, no, believe me, I get it. They're a head coach, man. They're busy. And so if that's something that we can almost take off of their plate with that class, then absolutely we'll do that. But on the same token, if they're like, no, I've got this workout plan that I want them to do, like, cool, man, we'll get in there and we'll push them and make sure they do it. And the difficult part is some of it, because there's so many just general students in there, and there might just be, maybe one girl that plays softball. Like, it can be hard for that one girl to go in there and motivate herself to work out when she's surrounded by a lot of other kids that, like, they don't have those same goals. They don't have that same motivation. And so that can make it difficult for them to go in there and get the work that they need to get done. But on the same hand, like, if they really want it, they have an opportunity to do it. And some kids take advantage and some of them don't.
So basically, you don't need to be on the same page as Coach Harris or Coach Gilliland or Coach Zaring or Coach Newton. They trust you, so all is good.
Yeah, and it's one of those things, too, where they trust us, and truthfully, they trust their kids to know,
right,
like, hey, don't go in there and squat 400 pounds if you have a game today. And, like, I'm not going to ask them to go in there and squat 400 pounds 5 times if they, like Coach Monroe, I'm not going to do that to his basketball players. I'm not going to throw them to a killer workout, on game day. Like, we're going to get them moving, get their blood moving a little bit, do some light, cardio flexibility stuff just to help them be ready to play. But, like, it's not like I'm going to go in there and try and kill them just to do it, right? Or like, hey, we do this every Monday. I don't care if Monday's a game for you guys. We're gonna, like, no, we're flexible, and we'll work around that as we need to.
Excuse me if I've ever asked this before, and I might ask it again, but are you a weight guy or are you a reps guy?
Dude, it's both, man. It's absolutely both. Like, there's room for both. I refuse. I do not agree with the question.
Well, when I say a weight guy, you could say to somebody, hey, we're almost going to max you, or we're going to have you do maybe heavier weight than normal, but if you can do heavier weight for 6 times, but you can rep something 15. There's not a one you prefer over the other?
It is a cycle. And so we operate on 6-week cycles. And so at the beginning of that cycle, we will be more, like muscular endurance focused, I guess you could say, where you're working with a little bit lighter weight and you're working with higher reps. And then as we kind of cycle down towards the end of that 6 weeks and you're building up to your max, the weight starts to go higher and the reps start to go lower. And so it's wherever you're at in the cycle, that's what you're doing. And again, that's credit to Coach Harlow for putting that together, right? Like, and we work percentages just like everybody else does, where you're working off a percentage of your max. And so whatever your max is, like, that's going to dictate whatever weight you're supposed to be doing. And now we emphasize to our kids too, like, hey, if you're doing sets of 10 and like you get to that 10th rep and it's still really easy, like, you need to add more weight. I don't care what the percentage is. Or if you can't do all 10 reps, like, maybe you take a little weight off and work around that a little bit. But it's regimented in the sense that there's a plan for every day during that 6-week cycle. And at the end of it, start it again. And like, again, we've seen some pretty significant growth in kids, not just the weight that they're able to lift, but just the weight that they're able to carry. Like, you're talking like 30-pound gains sometimes between kids between their sophomore year and their junior year, which is huge for football.
Last question about weights, and then I'll close it up pretty soon after that. Do you guys go on the schedule of you have them ever since September? Same kids? Since
yeah. So we don't do we don't do semester breaks or anything like that. They have the same classes the whole year long. Yeah.
Anybody that came into your class, quote unquote, maybe I don't want to say bored, but not really a weight person type thing, and you kind of got them interested in weights?
Yeah, and so those are the kids that I actually really enjoy being around. It's kids that maybe haven't been in that setting before, and typically it's going to be somebody who's not an athlete, but like they just like they want to get into that, and like maybe they're a little nervous to go to a gym and kind of start on their own. And so just teaching them like the basics of like, hey, this is how you strength train. And again, talking about the different cycles that we go through and how percentages work and good form on all your lifts, and like to have kids that are genuinely interested in that. Not even just to make themselves better athletes for their sport, but just because they enjoy it. Like, those are the kids that I enjoy teaching. Now, for every one of those, I'm going to have, 10 kids that are going in there and doing what they have to do just to get the grade, which is fine too. But yeah, we have some kids like that from time to time that like, they've never been in a weight room. They have no idea what they're doing. And then they get really into it because like they see the gains. Like, that's the cool thing about lifting weights. Like, the work that you put in, you will actually see the results of that. over sometimes as early as like 2 or 3 weeks. If you've never lifted before, like, and you lift consistently for 3 weeks, you're going to be significantly stronger. You know, you call them newbie gains. You get them newbie gains early on, and then you can see the result that it's having, and then you just keep going and keep rolling with it.
What has to be done for somebody to beat LCA?
Number 8, graduate. No, I mean, you got to play perfect, man. That's and the tough part about LCA is they have, you know, they're an incredibly talented team. There's not many holes in that group if there are any at all, right? It's not like you can point to one dude on their team and be like, that's the guy we're going to pick on. They're pretty good across the board. And then obviously they have some very special talent on that team in Gideon Davidson, and not just him. They've got several players that are all very, very good players that would start for anybody out there.
Right.
Number 5, the outside linebacker. They got number 2, the corner. I mean, it's yeah, the Belford kid, the Deo kid, like they're all, and that's not, you know, Easton Ware obviously is a very good football player.
Sure.
You know, they're good across the board. And then Frank Rocco is as good a coach as you're gonna find. Like, he's from a schematic standpoint, like he's just as good as anybody else out there, right? And so it's not like they're just like a supremely talented team. You're like, all right, maybe we can out scheme. Like, you're not gonna out scheme those guys. Like, you know, you got to be sound in what you do. And it's not necessarily like, you know, they may find some holes in what you do and they might out scheme you. But it's not even that. It's just like they are going to be sound and fundamental, and like there are not going to be gaps in what they do. You're not going to be able to pick on any aspect of their scheme just because they're so well coached and so fundamentally sound. And so like, what's going to happen to beat LCA? Like you got to go out there and you got to beat them. They're not going to beat themselves. They're not going to turn the ball over. They're not going to do things like that. Like, you got to go out there and beat them, and that's really hard when they got the best player in the state.
I would debate you on one thing you said when you said the other team has to play perfect. I still think you could play perfect, but I still think LCA is going to have to help you, whether it's turn the ball over or something like that. You know, because I mean, let's be honest. We talked about this many times. No team's going to play perfect.
No,
that's just impossible.
And here's the thing too, like, all right, so you talk about what goes into winning a football game. Like, you can out talent your opponent, right? Like, you can line up and just be better than them across the board. Well, you're not going to do that to LCA. Like, they're like, some of these teams as they get deeper and deeper into the playoffs, like, maybe they're not going to overpower those teams with talent, but it's not like anybody's just going to go out there and just be better than LCA, right? Like, that's just not going to happen. So you ain't going to get them that way. And then you talk about, well, maybe we can out-coach, maybe we can out-scheme. Well, like, no, you're not going to do that either. Because, like, Coach Rocco and his staff, like, they're good enough. They're not going to allow that to happen. They're not going to leave themselves a hole that you can just go out there and exploit. And so, you can't out-talent them. You're not going to out-scheme them. So, like, yeah, you almost got to get some help from them if you want to go out there and do it. Now, if you go out and you play your A-plus game and maybe they play their B-plus game, like, yeah, maybe you can find a way to get them. I'm very interested to see as they get deeper and they continue to play as good as they've played, like their A+ versus some of these other teams' A+. Like, what's that going to look like? That's the fun of high school football, right? Like, you never know. You're talking about 16-year-old kids out here, man. Like, maybe one of them's girlfriend broke up with them the day before the game.
Sure.
Yeah, you know?
I mean, it might not affect you and me, but it would affect the 16-year-old.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that when you're dealing with teenagers, man, it can be anything. It can honestly be anything.
And, you know, I'll use JF names here. Something might not affect Stax Rowland that could affect Dylan Marks.
Absolutely. And like, that's the thing with all these kids are different. Like, they all have different ways of getting motivated and different things that will affect them differently. And sometimes, you know, as a coach, you can stay on top of that. And sometimes it's completely out of your control. Like, you know, it's some players, like, you know, maybe they've got stuff going on at home. Like, you might have an idea, but there's not necessarily a whole lot that you can do to fix that. Some kids are able to compartmentalize that, and it's not going to go out there and affect their play. Some kids aren't. And like, that's just the reality of high school football. That's what makes it fun. Like, you never really know until you get out there and play on Friday.
How do you beat Sherando?
Same thing. Like, you know, they obviously, they don't have any individual player that's the level of Davidson from LCA, but like, you know, nobody does, right?
Right.
But I mean, Sherando they're just a very, very good, fundamentally sound team. Like, they don't go out there and beat themselves. Their quarterback is a phenomenal player. Like, he's going to go out there and make plays. And truthfully, if you watch that game against Salem, I mean, they went down early and down by a good bit early. I think it was 20-0 at one point. And that kid just found a way to keep him in the game, and he went out there and made plays and converted some key third downs and drove him down the field. And I mean, like I was really impressed with the game that he played against Salem. And so, again, it's one of those deals where you're not going to be able to go out and out scheme them. Now, I don't think they have the same, like I said, top level talent of LCA. And so could somebody go out there and out talent them? I don't think that's necessarily outside the realm of possibility in the same way that it would be with a team like LCA. And obviously when you talk about Phoebus, that's all anybody talks about is, oh my God, they just have talent across the board, and they do. We haven't seen them this year against any teams from out this way, so it's kind of hard to say how they match up. Because I just go back to last year, when they played Salem in the state final, and everybody was just convinced that they were going to blow Salem out of the water, and it ended up being a really good football game. So who knows, right? Like Sherando, maybe they match up really well against Phoebus. I truly don't know. I haven't seen Phoebus play one time this year. I haven't seen them on film or anything like that, so honestly, I can't say.
Shoot, I go back to when they played Heritage several years ago in the state title, and their athleticism level is just on a different level.
Yeah, and I watched that game too. Yeah, and that was a really, really good Heritage football team, and that was one of those situations where they just got out talented, right? And there's not a ton you can do. Like again, you got to go out there and hope to play your A+ game, and maybe they play their B+ game.
And even when I was doing games where Bradley was coaching at William Campbell, I remember one time they played a team from Franklin, not Franklin County, but Franklin, Virginia, and Franklin had a guy named Daniel Babb. And Bradley would give me a scouting report and it said best running back ever. And I'm thinking, yeah, right. I've heard this stuff before. Best running back we ever faced. Yeah, right. But that kid won the game by himself. I think he ran for 325 yards. And when you have somebody like that where not one person can stop them, similar to Gideon, I mean, you're going to have to hope that you can, Gideon trips on his own shoe or something something like that.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
it's tough, man. It's tough. That's the challenge again of playing a team like LCA, where again they're going to be schematically sound, and then their top level talent is just it's next level, man. Like the Davidson kid, he's as good as they come. And again, like I will tell anybody, as good of a running back as he is, and he's a really, really, really good running back, he is just as good on defense. Like that's where nobody talks about. Like I think we ran the ball 40 times against them, and that kid had like 25 tackles.
And he can return kicks.
Yeah, and he impacts special teams, right?
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, as they get deeper into the playoffs, like that kid is going to start playing on their kickoff team. He's going to start playing on their punt team, and like he's going to run down the field and cover kicks and make plays too. He's a flat out football player, man, and there ain't many kids out there that can impact all three phases of the game in the way that guy does.
But last thing on that topic, and then I'm going to get to the random questions real quick. When you start putting somebody on, every team or multiple teams, then are you sucking the energy from the one thing he does really well?
Maybe. I don't know. And this is the debate that you can have a lot in high school football, and it comes more in should we play this guy both ways, or should we just let him focus on offense, or just let him focus on defense? Or if he's playing both ways, should we try and hold him off of special teams? I think during the regular season, you do that stuff more so just for injury prevention purposes.
Sure.
Like if they're getting a lot of reps on both sides of the ball, you don't want to throw them out there on special teams too, especially like kickoff and things where there's just, due to the nature of how it works, maybe there's a little bit more injury risk there. But on the same hand, if you're playing in a state final and that kid's the best player on your team, I'm not going to keep him off the field until he tells me he's got to come off the field, And I don't think that kid's going to tell anybody he needs to come off the field. That's just who he is.
I don't want to have my best offensive basketball player have to guard the other guy's best offensive basketball player, because then I'm asking him to expend energy on defense, and does that take away from offense? So, we could argue it all day long.
But my argument would be I'm pretty sure Michael Jordan won Defensive Player of the Year once or twice, didn't he? I don't know. I might be making that up, but
you're right.
So
but if I have Michael Jordan defending the best player on that team, is Michael Jordan's 35-point effort going to go down to 25? And do I need
maybe
10 points? Maybe,
but you probably don't need those 10 points, because now their best player, his 35-point effort might go down to a 15-point effort because he's got MJ guarding him. That's the difference, right? If Gideon's your gunner on punt team, if he makes a tackle at the 10-yard line instead of that kid maybe getting to the 25, that's 15 less yards or 15 more yards you're allowing your defense to give up. That's the give and take, I guess you could say, of how that stuff works.
I think we could ask multiple people that question, and we're going to get multiple answers.
Yeah.
So,
Again,
anyway.
That's the fun thing about football.